So when we talk about $30 billion, I mean, hopefully everybody can see my screen. I think you can. It's a lot of money. And so what really am I speaking about? It's pretty surprising that this type of damages can be done. So first, we got a great intro from the team. Thank you very much. I love the Jeopardy game. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Super fun. So thank you, Mark, the ELB team, and of course the training arcade. That's phenomenal. So just quick agenda on what I'm going to do. We're going to do some intros. We're going to talk about the scope of the problem, our solution here, and how we're tackling that. And then we're going to have some challenges that we're having, as well as brainstorm some stuff. And then we're going to jump into some questions, as well as just finishing off with some thank yous. So a quick thing on me, aside from loving tattoos and drinking lots of bourbon, as Mark pointed out, I also have 4 daughters, which is another crazy one. But this is me, Jay Stevens. I'm the chief disruptor. I call myself that at DPA, which is I like to throw a wrench into everything that I do. Try to change things up and keep things fresh. DPA, we're just a hardworking, fearless bunch of experts, writers, and developers trying to make magic happen and innovate. We create action-oriented training and technology solutions that improve results. And lastly, why we're awesome, we like to partner with amazing companies to get the most from every employee and contractor training interaction. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. All right, so scope of the problem. Like this image is obviously terrifying, and you may or may not have experienced this in your own community or city or town, but there is a lot of things under the ground that we're not aware of that can cause catastrophic things such as fires, explosions. So really, there's 100 billion feet. This is a lot, and this is just our best guess. 100 billion feet or 20 million miles of underground utilities, which is more than a football's field length for every man, woman, and child. That's just below your feet. And every 9 minutes, one of those utilities is damaged through excavation. Excavation could be you planting a tree in your backyard. It could be an excavator out, digging a trench somewhere, or it could simply be a farmer plowing a field somewhere and hits a transmission pipeline. So it's pretty terrifying stuff. And that's just the stuff we know about. So that $30 billion that I'm talking about that is the result of these damages is far greater than that, really, because these are just the ones we know about. And that 30 billion accounts for direct costs like facility repair, like repairing the utilities, but also includes indirect costs like property damage, environmental contamination and mitigation, medical bills, funerals for people that have obviously it's a pretty serious problem out there. And so how do we make an impact and actually reduce these damages and save some lives out there? And that really is the problem. And over the last 5 years, damages have plateaued. So we see the same root causes day in, day out, year in, year out, causing these same $30 billion. So just over the last 5 years, that's 150 billion reasons to be trying to train people differently and do a better job out there. Because let's face it, traditional types of tools just aren't working. They're not having an impact anymore. So we've got to use tools like CenarioVR, like the training arcade and that awesome game, and other things like that to really do a better job and drive home these messages so people can go home safe to their families. So that's really the scope of the problem that we're trying to tackle. Now I'll speed through this because I know we got another game at the end of this. And of course, I love Disney. So I'm going to stay on and try to crush that one because I have 4 daughters. So I know every Disney movie out there. But let's talk about how we're tackling this problem. So really, this is just a simplistic view of what we're doing. But it's great content creation, storytelling, story writing. It all starts there for us and how we put forth a training program that really resonates with the demographic that we're trying to educate. We have stellar instructional designers and developers who then bring that to life and create something magical. We then blend in things like edutainment and gamification. Edutainment or contentainment, call it whatever the term is. Really, what we're trying to do is find people who are credible or who could be relatable to the demographic who we are trying to train. And then, it helps deliver that message. And then gamification, obviously, you just saw a great example of that. which is phenomenal. Using your own content and say deploying it in a game like Jeopardy would be essentially gamification. But ultimately, we're all just trying to do the same thing, which is achieve a desired business outcome. And if you're just playing games for the sake of playing games, that's not a desired business outcome for us. We have to have a game that's designed specifically to create that retention. And then it brings us to the tools. We use tools like CenarioVR as well as the training arcade, which is new to us. So we're still learning on that, but again, super excited about it to really change the game in which we're working and go out there and crush some training and save some people's lives. So I'll quickly stop that share, and I'm going to move on to sharing some examples, just so that for the sake of time and taking questions later on, let's jump into a few examples of exactly how I'm doing that. Share some sound. Now this might come through really loud on your end, but when I talked about content-tainment earlier or edutainment, one of the programs we've built uses a celebrity spokesperson by the name of Tim Kennedy. You may or may not have heard of this fine gentleman. But anyway, he is the speaker or presenter throughout our entire scenario course. So again, we've built videos with Mr. Kennedy throughout just to make sure. So I'll just play an intro video so you can get that going first. I mean, all of you familiar with CenarioVR will know, the immersive environment and how the assets can be put in there. But really, ultimately, what I want to show you is just this kind of video about Tim Kennedy and how that blends into what I'll talk about next. Not sure if the audio is coming through on your end.
Jay, the audio is not coming through.
Oh, my apologies. I think I probably muted it just because when I was queuing it up. There we go. Sorry about that.
Are paramount in getting the job done right. On this virtual job site, we will do things the right way, my way. Here, we'll learn about the importance of being an 811 pro and what safe digging is all about.
So again, my apologies.
You'll be on the work site soon,
so you should. But again, just using videos like that within the environment that really speak to the audience. Excavators, for example, aren't going to relate necessarily. Even though that I have construction background and have worked in construction, I'm not necessarily as relatable to somebody who in the field as, say, a Tim Kennedy is, who can really speak to this audience. So that we're finding great success with that. And then, of course, you guys have all seen interactions like this before, where you drag and drop or search for items and then drag it and drop it into a toolbox or something. But I'll show you more on that later. One of the things, and I don't know if anybody else is doing things like this out there, so I'm curious, and it's kind of like an open question, but we've custom coded out inside of the software progress trackers in different ways. So they're basically heads-up displays that we're putting in there, in addition to the other tools that you can have in there. But the heads-up display is proving effective for this environment, because the heads-up display in the virtual environment, the user could be in there forever. And one of the feedback things that we had was that they didn't know when it was going to end. So we've created these unique HUD style, video game style heads-up displays to track their progress. So that's one of the unique things that we're kind of using to track their progress and provide additional engagement, as well as the hotspots, the drag and drops in the videos. So that's one example. The next example I would show is when it comes to excavation, or even just the simulated environment, we have found like actually putting the excavator into the environment has been one of the most effective things, instead of trying to build out a simulated environment, something they recognize. So we did a photo shoot in Vegas, and actually in Vegas, California, as well as Kansas, trying to get certain types of photos. But they've been excellent for displaying these materials. So another one of our custom heads-up displays that we built is something like this, where it's more interactive, where it's tracking them within, and they can move around more like a traditional e-learning course, and they can kind of switch back and forth between different modules. And again, just having the ability to track their progress. So that's really, really cool. This is interesting because, so let me just unmute this.
Drag the spray paint can and drop them in marked places.
So with this, we essentially just used one of our AI voices. This isn't the live course, but ultimately the goal is for an excavator to learn how to white line the job site prior to excavating. And that's what this is. So I'm just going to unmute this for a second, or mute that. Nobody needs to listen to that music. And then it just drags and drops. And as we use these triggers and drag and drops and hotspots, it's giving feedback loop to the user. I'm just going to keep it muted. Feedback loop to the user so that they understand why they're doing it. And then of course, giving them best practices, tips, and things in order to continue on with the process and do it properly. Because depending on where you work in North America, there's certain laws. So when we build these courses, we have to be very focused on the actual law, because there is a lot of laws around excavating. You may or may not know it, and calling the 811 before you dig and all that fun stuff. But it is serious business, and you can be fined, or you can even face jail time if you don't do it properly. So that's why we do things like this, to say, hey, before you even start, this is what you've got to do. So that's one example of, say, a drag and drop. Another one is, again, a different environment, is creating ways for them to understand how to use the system or to interact with the calendar, understand the time frame in which the excavation has to take place. So what we've done also is created a custom clickable count. These are things that I don't know if I've seen out there yet. So I'm curious at the end of this, if anybody has feedback or ideas or what they're doing. But we've built these calendars internally. So when a user is first started out, I'm going to keep the audio off for this, but actually I'll keep it on. I'll actually unmute this for a sec, because the background music that's playing might be coming through is fairly loud, but that's from another one of my slides down the road here. I just can't unmute it. But when the idea is that when they come here, they have to say, okay, your dig is on the 23rd at 7 a.m. and it's your planned start date. So I want to start digging on the 23rd. When am I supposed to be contacting 811, the national number to call before you dig, or contact before you dig? Typically people use internet these days. So it gives them the option to try to figure out what the law is, because there's a specific law for this. So let's say, oh, hey, I'm digging on the 23rd. I'm just going to call on, I don't know, Tuesday. But what'll happen is that it creates it's actually not any
2 working day notice. Please try again.
So I kind of just kind of unmuted it for a second there, but it's giving a kind of a negative feedback saying, hey, unfortunately, that's not correct. So they could click on any one of these dates in this calendar to give them the information that they need to understand and retain when they can actually contact 811 to process their dig ticket. So, I mean, that's probably too much information for you, but ultimately, this is one of the cool things that we've created that we get a lot of positive engagement with users, is like, okay, this is valuable. So of course, if they phoned 811 any one of those days before the 23rd, that would be legally the required notice that they're required to give on a state level. So that's really cool interaction. Of course, it's talking right now in the background, telling them congratulations, you've done this and that, and then it moves on from there to the next thing. So that is an interesting style of displaying content. So I'll run through a few more examples. I'm pretty fast at going through this stuff. So what I'm really curious is, when we get through some problems and brainstorming some ideas, I'd love to hear what everybody else is doing there, if you want to engage or not. It's totally up to you. Another one, when it comes to, so you've made the call to 811, which is extremely important. You legally have to do that, at which point the utilities are notified by the 811 center that you're planning a dig. Their job at that point, they're legally required to go out to this utility or to the site where you're working and locate and mark the approximate location of the underground facilities. Now, when I say approximate, it's because all they can do is put paint on the ground using, subsurface utility radar or mapping systems, as well as locating equipment to determine where it approximately is. But it's approximate because they could tell you it's here, but you dig maybe 6 inches to the left and you'll still hit it. So there's a required minimum clearance before you can dig there. So that's really what happens. So when you get out to a work site, maybe you've called in before, to do some work in your home, and some guy shows up at your house and puts yellow and orange and yellow. That's really what they're doing. They're kind of marking the utility lines for you, generally speaking, so that you know approximately where they're, so you don't hit them. So how do we teach somebody that they have to ensure that they have all the responses? Because you're, as an excavator, you have to legally confirm that you've received responses from everybody that was notified. So if you don't do that and then you dig anyway, and then you hit a gas line, you could be liable for fines. And so the challenge is how do we reinforce that information? So how we did that was this. So we created a kind of a heads up display clipboard. Again, you know, you'll see the progress tracker is tracking them. You've got these cool images here that they can see all the paint on the ground out here, the markings, and so what's next? So they find the hot spot. They're going to click on that. And again, I'm just going to keep the sound muted because again, there's music playing in the background there. But just look around and find the paint mark. So now we've got this kind of clipboard. I know it takes up a lot of space, but you couldn't make it any smaller, especially if somebody's doing it on a mobile device. It was a bit of a challenge. But they've got to look around and find the paint marks and then confirm by clicking on this clipboard what utilities they see on the ground and what they don't. So really, you know, obviously we can see yellow. Yellow is obviously gas. Orange is, you know, telecommunications or fiber optic line. As a matter of fact, I think you can see here. So it says, you know, fiber optic. So you've got the orange. You've got red, which is electric. Okay, so we're good there. So we've got 3 of the 4 utilities, but I don't see the purple. So again, at this point, you could simply hit submit, and it's going to give that positive feedback trigger like, hey, congratulations. Now let's move on to the next thing. So again, which would, of course, in this scenario would be, you know, learning what happens if somebody didn't respond. So that's kind of the next thing. So that's one of the unique tools that we're using. And I got a couple more to show you, and then we're going to touch on a few more things, and then I'm just going to straight up open it up for discussion and some brainstorming if everybody wants to join me on that, and go from there. So lastly is, as we discussed earlier, you know, these paint marks on the ground are just the approximate location. So again, how do you reinforce to them that they can't dig in a certain area around this utility? You have to dig with caution. So what we've done is done another simple style of drag and drop, which is where they have to click this, and then it's kind of like a tape measure. So all they do here is because outside of here, and you won't hear this, but you'll see the lines pop up. So now this line here, that's 24 inches off the center, is legally defined as what's called the tolerance zone. So if you're digging in California, which this is, if you see paint on the ground, you legally cannot dig inside of this 24-inch distance on either side of this line without hand exposing it with a tool first and seeing where this utility line is actually located. Because if you were to hit this without, let's say you just had a contractor come in here and drop a fence post inside of this area here, and he hit that electrical line and, you know, severed an electrical line, A, he could be killed. But B, you'd be liable for repair of that, because you or him, if you're the homeowner, you would be liable. But if he was just a contractor for you, then of course he would be liable. So again, we're just teaching them the simples of, hey, FYI, you cannot dig in here. And so, because again, a lot of people, when we come back to the $30 billion worth of damages, this is where it happens. You know, people don't understand, well, A, that they've got to contact 811 first before they dig. B, that these paint marks, oh, hey, well, he put some red paint on the ground. It looks like it's in a straight line, but doesn't mean that utility is right underneath this red line. It could be actually 6 or 8 inches offset. It's just the approximate location using the technology that we have, because technology is not perfect when it comes to locating these utilities underground. So that's another one that we utilize, which is really, really cool. And then here is just another one that I wanted to show you, which is more a simple thing, but back to some of the custom pieces of coding that we're putting into these courses in order to engage them and help them track. So as they're going through a course, and of course, this is a picture was last year, my beard was a lot longer. But again, when they click on these progress bars, we've built out these custom heads-up displays so that they can understand where they are in this specific module. This is a driver safety module, because another big problem is excavators or contractors getting access to big fancy trucks like this one from the companies that they work for, and then of course they get into accidents with backhoes and dump trucks and things like that on the job site. So it's kind of part and parcel of the damage prevention that we work on. So again, that's kind of cool that we do these little heads-up displays, and for us, they have been proving very, very effective. Now, when we talk about Scenario, lastly, I'm just going to go into some of the challenges that we've had. So some of the challenges that we've had with Scenario, not that it's a challenge, it's more something that we weren't aware of, was how do you launch it effectively on what type of device? Especially if you're running it through an LMS and not using CVR Live, which CVR Live is great. But again, when we build out programs for our clients like this one here for 8-in-1 Pro, everything we do is branded to them, even though this is DPA's LMS, and it's our technology running it, we still brand it out completely to them, so they don't, anybody who interacts it from the state of California or from Nevada, it's the 8-in-1 Pro brand, not DPA's brand. So how do you get a course to function properly in an LMS with all this high-tech stuff in it, even though it's a simple like a SCORM file? We were challenged by videos. So initially our LMS was struggling with taking a CVR file and playing that video. So you would see everything else in the immersive environment, but the video wouldn't play. So we had to switch over to a CDN style LMS portal, which again is part of our LMS. We just had to create a different branch of it to use a content delivery network in order to ensure that it didn't matter if you're in Australia, because we have clients in Australia, or clients in California or Wisconsin or Kansas or wherever they are, or here in Calgary, Alberta, anywhere they are, they're accessing it through a CDN network. So it's faster. And of course, those videos seem to be playing amazingly. So that was one of the challenges that we have. Another one of the challenges that we'll chat more about later is, in having other things available within in CVR itself, like the ability to maybe put an iframe or something in there that we'd love to have, an embed code, maybe it's available, but I think we've been challenged with, say, adding, for example, the training arcade, adding a training arcade game inside of, say, CVR. I think we require an embed code, but I task the group here of professionals and talented people, as well as the folks at ELB and CVR and training arcade, is how can I embed that, say, Jeopardy game or a Wheel of Fortune game inside one of these courses instead of having it as a separate file outside of it. So again, our team has been working on it, but we haven't been able to make it successful yet. So I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about that. And then lastly was, how do you, it's awesome. You've got Tim Kennedy. I mean, the guy is, he's not necessarily always politically correct, but the audience that our demographic, they love that he's not, that he is politically incorrect, I guess, is how do we get them to engage with it? How can we make it fast to download and deploy, and how can they do it? So we only publish this in a way so they can interact with their mobile device. We don't encourage them to use the VR glasses, which has been a challenge for them because, again, A, with COVID, and B, with just accessibility to headsets, even though you can just use a very simple headset to put your phone in. So that was another challenge, is reaching our demographic. And then how do we encourage them to finish it? So I really want to open up today and talk about the challenges. And the challenges is for us at DPA and this industry of damage prevention, and the $30 billion a year, we're trying to knock that number down. We're trying to knock down injuries, accidents and deaths. We're trying to reduce all of that with a tool like this. How do we increase the completion ratio when by law, you're required to do all this stuff before you dig, but by law, excavators are not required to be trained or take training. So the clients we work with are essentially nonprofit organizations, and our goal, our mission is to get this stuff out there. So we build it for them, and then they give it away for free. They try to educate as many people in their state as possible in order to do that. So, and I'll show you why I asked this question. If I come into the analytics portion of our LMS, right? Actually, I do have one more challenge here. So one of the things we had issues with was iPhones or Apple products. When somebody interacts with our file, they have to do all these steps in order to enable the program to work. If you're using an Android device, it worked well right out of the gate. So again, one of the things I'm posing as a question to the group is, for discussion purposes, how would we solve this so that we don't have to, because a lot of times we get fallout because somebody has an iPhone and they've got to go through, or an iPad, and they have to go through their settings in their privacy, security, and make sure all the cross-site tracking, that stuff, and block all cookies, right? So that was an issue for us. But this seems to be part of the problem, but and we don't get a ton of tech support on it. But I feel like there's drop off of learners because of this extra step. So if we go over here and we look at the analytics as a whole for this group, even though the course is way better than any other damage prevention course out there on the market in all of North America, and using CenarioVR has catapulted this. It has all the fancy tools. It has a top, like a celebrity spokesperson. We are still hovering below 70% on completion ratio. And obviously it's not law for them to take this. It's just suggested. So there's fallout there, but I really am curious how we could tackle the challenge of trying to get them. I know the training arcade would be a huge impact here, and we can use it, those games and things that the training arcade enables us to do inside of separate files, so they can go from file to file to file, right? Which they do anyway, right? Because each one of the modules of this course is built as a separate course. So again, they kind of go through module 1, the quiz, module 2, the quiz, and then redo that so that they can get more badges and points using gamification, which again is important. But how do we get them to finish? And so I think if we utilize the training academy or something, or sorry, the training arcade, not training academy, the training arcade, to do something like that would be beneficial. So that is really kind of my demo on all the things that we're doing and how we're trying to tackle this $30 billion problem. We have had great success in all of our markets all across North America and slowly reducing that, but we're not making fast enough impact. And that's really where I want to move next, is to jump onto that and finish strong and reduce those damages and send people home safe to their families. So anyway, that's it, guys, for me. I know I'm fast at 10:30, but I'm just going to open it up here for questions.